Hello. Tonight, you travel far beyond the reach of cities, roads, and written memory into a world so ancient that even the earliest stories have not yet begun. Above you stretches a vast African sky of the Holocene age, and beneath your feet lies a landscape quietly preparing the stage for countless generations who have not yet arrived. You find yourself standing in a place that feels both familiar and impossibly distant. The air is gentle, carrying the scent of grasses that stretch across broad plains beneath a pale golden dawn. Around you, the land appears calm and patient, as though time itself has decided to move a little more slowly than usual. In every direction, the horizon unfolds like an endless painting. Lakes shimmer beneath soft sunlight, reflecting clouds that drift lazily overhead. Small ripples travel across the water's surface with such unhurried grace that they seem determined to win a contest for the world's slowest movement. Long before the rise of kingdoms, cities, or monuments, this region of Africa exists as part of a greener Sahara. Geological evidence tells you that vast portions of what is now desert once contained rivers, wetlands, and fertile grasslands. The transformation may seem surprising today, rather like discovering that your neighborhood supermarket was once a tropical rainforest. So before you get completely comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly enjoy what we're creating here. And while you settle in for tonight's journey, feel free to leave a comment sharing your location and local time. It is always fascinating to imagine listeners gathering from different corners of the world, connected by the same quiet story unfolding beneath the same stars. Now, slowly dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan, letting the steady hum of the air fill the room. And in that gentle rhythm, we quietly step into tonight's journey together. You begin walking beside one of the immense lakes that once spread across the Sahara during the African humid period. The shoreline bends gently toward the horizon, its waters reflecting the pale colors of the morning sky. Water birds drift silently across the surface, while reeds sway softly beneath the passing breeze. Nothing here feels hurried or unsettled. The lake, the grasslands, and the distant sky seem to move according to a rhythm older than memory itself. Every sound blends into the landscape with quiet harmony, creating a world that feels complete, balanced, and entirely at peace with the passage of time. Scientific studies suggest that between roughly 11,000 and 5,000 years ago, northern Africa received significantly more rainfall than it does today. Seasonal monsoon systems traveled much farther north, feeding vast lakes, rivers, and grasslands across the region. In many areas, the landscape resembled modern African savannas rather than desert terrain, creating favorable conditions for an extraordinary variety of plants, animals, and thriving ecosystems. As you continue walking beside the shoreline, signs of life appear in every direction around you. Hippopotamuses move slowly through shallow waters, leaving temporary trails that vanish beneath gentle ripples. Crocodiles rest along muddy banks warmed by the morning sun. In the distance, large herds graze across open grasslands, their outlines softened by the shimmering air rising through the calm light of dawn. Many of these ancient environments are known today through evidence hidden beneath the sands of the modern Sahara. Layers of sediment preserve records of former lakes, rivers, and wetlands that disappeared thousands of years ago. Fossils, pollen grains, and mineral deposits allow researchers to reconstruct entire landscapes. In a sense, the Sahara keeps an extraordinarily detailed diary, though it writes every page using dust, stone, and time. You pause beside an outcrop of weathered rock rising quietly above the surrounding terrain. Across its surface lie subtle marks left by waters that flowed here long ago. Fine patterns etched into the stone reveal the direction of ancient currents. Looking closely, you might imagine the rock as an elderly storyteller, patiently reminding visitors that the world around it once looked remarkably different. The deeper you travel into this prehistoric landscape, the more noticeable the silence becomes. Yet it is not an empty silence. Instead, it feels filled with distant bird calls, rustling grasses, and the steady movement of water across the land. These sounds blend together into a gentle rhythm that never seeks attention, yet remains present, soft and reassuring throughout the day. Far above, the stars follow their familiar paths across the night sky with calm and unwavering precision. Although thousands of years separate this landscape from the modern world, many constellations appear remarkably similar to those seen today. Ancient communities have not yet recorded them in written traditions here, Yet the heavens already offer a steady sense of order, continuity, and quiet reassurance. One fascinating detail often overlooked is that traces of ancient shorelines remain visible even today through satellite imagery and geological surveys. Modern technology allows researchers to identify long-lost river systems buried beneath vast layers of sand. Some channels extend for hundreds of miles across the desert, revealing an entire hidden geography preserved beneath one of Earth's largest and most enduring deserts. As evening settles gently across the grasslands, the colors of the landscape begin to soften and blend together. Gold fades into amber, while amber slowly drifts toward shades of violet and blue. Reflections stretch across the quiet lakes until water and sky seem almost impossible to distinguish. The world appears suspended between one day and the next in perfect stillness. You notice animal footprints pressed into damp ground beside the water's edge, preserved briefly within the soft earth. Some belong to creatures that still roam parts of Africa today. Others were left by species whose local ranges shifted long ago. These marks survive only temporarily before wind and weather erase them, reminding you how gently time reshapes every surface it touches. Yet beneath this peaceful scene, subtle changes have already begun their slow work across the continent. Variations in Earth's orbit gradually influence climate systems and seasonal rainfall patterns. Lakes expand and contract over long periods of time. The transformation unfolds so slowly that no single generation could fully observe it. Nature turns its pages quietly, one season after another. For now, however, the green Sahara remains vibrant and alive beneath the ancient Holocene sky. Rivers continue their journeys. Grasslands stretch toward distant horizons. Crocodiles drift through calm waters while evening winds move softly across the land. And as these nearly invisible climatic changes gather strength in the background, they prepare the path for the first communities that will soon emerge across this vast and remarkable continent. The morning arrives quietly over the ancient Sahara, and you continue your journey through a landscape that still carries the memory of water. The grasslands of earlier centuries begin to thin in places, yet the land remains far from the endless desert familiar to modern maps. Beneath your feet, hidden under layers of future sand, great rivers continue their slow and patient courses. You walk beside one of these forgotten waterways, although in your own time it can no longer be seen. Modern satellite technology, developed thousands of years later, reveals the faint outlines of ancient channels buried beneath the Sahara. Scientists studying radar imagery have discovered river systems stretching across vast distances, like ghostly blueprints preserved beneath the world's largest desert. For now, however, the river remains very much alive. Clear water reflects the pale colors of the morning sky while reeds sway softly along its edges. Beneath the surface, fish move in brief flashes of silver light. The current flows with quiet certainty, resembling a traveler who departed early, knows the way, and never feels compelled to rush. Along the shoreline, small communities of hunter-gatherers establish seasonal camps beside dependable water. Their shelters rest near fishing grounds, gathering areas, and pathways used by migrating animals. Life unfolds close to the rhythms of the natural world, where the changing weather and movement of wildlife provide guidance more reliable than any written schedule. Each day follows a familiar pattern shaped by observation and experience. People gather edible plants, fish in calm shallows, and watch herds crossing distant grasslands. Knowledge passes gently between generations through practice and memory. Daily life feels steady and balanced, measured by the return of seasons rather than by clocks or calendars. The river offers far more than a dependable source of drinking water. It serves as a natural corridor linking distant communities across broad landscapes. Information, tools, customs, and traditions travel gradually from one settlement to another along its banks. No formal borders divide the land. Instead, the river itself becomes a living map, and every bend carries stories passed carefully between generations over centuries. As evening approaches, you imagine standing quietly beside the water beneath a sky crowded with stars. The river reflects the heavens so perfectly that it seems as though two separate night skies exist at once. Looking upward and downward simultaneously might feel slightly disorienting, rather like opening two identical tabs on a computer and forgetting which one is playing the music. Archaeological evidence suggests that many ancient communities remained near these waterways for extended periods of time. Researchers have uncovered stone tools, hearth remains, and traces of camps that reveal long-term settlement patterns. These discoveries suggest that people understood the importance of reliable water sources. While the Sahara still supports abundant life, rivers increasingly offer stability within an environment undergoing gradual and persistent change. You continue downstream through a landscape shaped by countless generations of flowing water. The riverbanks curve gently through open grasslands dotted with scattered acacia trees. Birds call from distant branches while insects hum softly among the vegetation. Herds of antelope move carefully through tall grasses. Everywhere you look, life appears connected by the river's steady presence and enduring influence across the land. One of the most fascinating windows into this ancient world survives within the rock art of Tassili among the sandstone formations of present-day Algeria. Thousands of paintings and engravings remain preserved across the stone surfaces. These remarkable artworks provide evidence of a greener Sahara and offer valuable insights into daily life, environmental conditions, and cultural traditions that existed many thousands of years ago. As you study these images in your imagination, entire scenes begin to emerge from the stone. Cattle graze across painted grasslands. Boats travel along rivers that have long since disappeared. Human figures gather, dance, hunt, and share daily activities within thriving communities. The scenes feel surprisingly familiar, reminding you that people in the distant past also lived lives shaped by routine, cooperation, family, and curiosity. The paintings reveal something of great importance about the ancient Sahara. They show that large areas of what is now desert once supported thriving ecosystems capable of sustaining both wildlife and human communities. This conclusion is not based on imagination or legend. Archaeology, geology, and climatology all point toward the same understanding, helping researchers reconstruct a landscape that existed thousands of years before recorded history began. You spend a quiet moment studying a painted boat carved carefully into stone. At first glance, the image appears simple and modest, yet it offers powerful evidence that substantial lakes and rivers once existed nearby. Long ago, people traveled across waters that have since disappeared beneath sand and time. Their journeys unfolded through landscapes now hidden from view, preserved only through traces such as these. Around you, the climate continues its gradual transformation. The change is so slow that it remains almost impossible to notice within a single lifetime. Rainfall patterns shift little by little across the region. Some lakes shrink during drier periods before partially recovering in wetter years. Certain grasslands become less reliable. Nature adjusts its course patiently, never announcing its intentions and rarely moving with sudden urgency. As generations come and go, these subtle environmental shifts begin to accumulate. Communities pay increasing attention to dependable sources of water and fertile land. Seasonal movements become more carefully organized and informed by experience. Knowledge about rivers, springs, wetlands, and rainfall grows increasingly valuable. Success depends not upon dramatic choices, but upon the steady ability to adapt to a landscape that is quietly evolving. In many regions, people gradually move toward areas where water remains available throughout the year. Among the most important destinations is the Nile Valley, whose river continues flowing with remarkable consistency. Fed by distant rains far to the south, the Nile provides a dependable source of life and stability. As surrounding environments become less predictable, its importance quietly grows with each passing generation. Yet this movement is not a sudden migration driven by disaster or fear. Instead, it unfolds slowly across many centuries, resembling the patient flow of the river itself. Families relocate, settlements expand, and traditions travel alongside those who carry them. The process reflects a recurring pattern throughout human history, where communities respond thoughtfully to environmental change through adaptation, continuity, and careful long-term decision-making. As night settles once again across the ancient Sahara, the hidden rivers continue flowing beneath the stars. Some will eventually disappear beneath advancing sands, while others will survive only in satellite images and archaeological records. But for now, they remain living arteries of a thriving landscape, quietly guiding both people and possibilities toward the fertile valleys that await in the chapters ahead. The river pathways and seasonal migrations of earlier generations gradually lead you toward a different rhythm of life. Here, beside lakes, wetlands, and fertile stretches of land, people begin spending longer periods in one place. The landscape still feels open and untamed, yet subtle signs of permanence emerge. Small communities take root like young trees, finding steady ground near dependable water. You arrive beside a broad lake whose surface glows softly beneath the morning sun. Nearby, clusters of shelters stand in quiet arrangement. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Children play close to the shoreline while adults repair tools, gather food, and prepare for daily tasks. Nothing feels hurried. Life unfolds according to familiar patterns repeated across seasons and generations. The water shapes nearly every aspect of existence. During wetter months, the surrounding land becomes rich with plant life. Fish are plentiful, animals gather nearby, and resources remain abundant. When drier periods arrive, people adapt their routines without abandoning the places they know. Their relationship with nature resembles a conversation rather than a struggle. As you move through the settlement, you notice how carefully daily activities are organized in a quiet, natural rhythm. Areas for food preparation, tool-making, and communal gatherings emerge gradually over time without formal planning. No grand architecture defines the space. Instead, stability is created through repetition. As the same paths are walked, the same tasks are performed, and the same stories are shared under familiar skies. Archaeological evidence from various regions of prehistoric Africa suggests that communities increasingly relied upon seasonal predictability. Water sources encouraged longer habitation, allowing people to develop deeper knowledge of local environments. This gradual shift toward more settled living becomes one of the quiet foundations upon which later civilizations will eventually stand. Among the most fascinating locations from this ancient era is Napta Playa, located in what is now southern Egypt. Thousands of years before the pyramids rise along the Nile Valley, people gather seasonally around shallow lakes that appear and disappear with rainfall. Their presence leaves subtle traces across the landscape, which continue to attract the attention of archaeologists, historians, and researchers studying early human adaptation in the Sahara. One remarkable discovery at Nabta Playa involves carefully arranged stone structures that appear aligned with significant astronomical events. Researchers suggest that certain stone circles and megalithic formations may have been used to observe movements of the stars and sun. Although interpretations remain subject to ongoing study and refinement, the site clearly demonstrates an early awareness of celestial patterns and a sophisticated relationship with the night sky. You imagine standing at this site before dawn, when the horizon begins to brighten with the first hints of light. Above you, stars slowly fade as the sun approaches from beyond the edge of the world. Generations of people observe these same cycles, recognizing how specific celestial events correspond with seasonal transitions, rainfall patterns, and changes in the surrounding environment. In a world without written calendars or fixed schedules, the sky itself becomes an incredibly reliable system for tracking time. The movement of celestial bodies provides structure for daily life. People learn to read the positions of stars, the phases of the moon, and the shifting angle of sunlight as natural indicators that guide decisions about travel, planting, and gathering resources. The passage of time is measured not through numbered months or written records, but through recurring natural rhythms. Communities observe the arrival of seasonal rains, the movement of migratory animals across the land, and the gradual shifting position of the sun throughout the year. These repeating patterns create a dependable framework that organizes life and supports cooperation within early societies. Such careful observation requires patience and continuity over many generations. Knowledge is not created by a single individual, but accumulated slowly through countless shared experiences. Elders pass down their understanding to younger members of the community, ensuring that important environmental knowledge is preserved. Like trees growing near steady water sources, wisdom develops gradually, rooted in long-term observation and collective memory. As settlements become more established, social relationships gradually deepen and grow more complex. Families remain connected across longer periods, creating stronger bonds between generations. Shared responsibilities encourage cooperation in daily tasks, while ceremonies mark important seasonal transitions and community events. Although these settlements remain relatively small, they demonstrate forms of organization that help preserve stability, continuity, and resilience amid changing environmental conditions. You spend part of an afternoon watching skilled craftspeople shape simple pottery near the edge of a lakeside settlement. Fresh clay vessels rest beneath the warm sun as they slowly dry and harden. Nearby, stone tools are carefully repaired and maintained. Objects such as these may appear ordinary, yet they represent meaningful advances. Durable containers improve storage, transportation, and daily efficiency, supporting increasingly settled ways of life. Evidence from archaeological sites across Africa suggests that networks of exchange are gradually expanding between communities. Certain materials sometimes travel surprisingly far from their original sources before reaching their final destinations. Shells, stones, pigments, and other valued items move through chains of interaction linking distant groups. These exchanges create connections between people who may never meet directly, yet still participate within the same broader network. The process unfolds so quietly that it can seem almost invisible to those living within it. One village shares resources with another. Travelers carry stories and knowledge alongside traded goods. New techniques for shaping tools or pottery spread gradually across neighboring regions. Over time, communities separated by great distances become linked through growing networks of awareness, laying foundations for larger systems that will emerge in future centuries. As evening settles gently over the lake, the settlement appears calm and harmonious. Reflections shimmer across the water's surface beneath fading light. Birds return to nesting places hidden among the reeds. Conversations grow softer as families gather around small fires. The entire scene feels suspended within a moment of balance, where human activity and natural cycles move together in quiet and lasting harmony. This stability does not mean the surrounding world remains unchanged. Environmental conditions continue evolving, sometimes subtly and sometimes more noticeably across generations. Yet communities respond through adaptation rather than disruption. Their strength emerges from careful observation, flexibility, and cooperation. These qualities allow people to thrive within shifting landscapes while maintaining continuity, even as broader environmental transformations slowly reshape the world around them. Under the stars of another quiet night, the villages rest beside their trusted waters. The people of Nabta Playa and countless similar communities continue watching the skies, following the seasons, and exchanging knowledge across growing networks. Their world remains calm and enduring, yet unseen currents of change are already beginning to connect distant regions of prehistoric Africa in ways that will shape the chapters still to come. The villages beside lakes and rivers now feel familiar as you continue your quiet journey through prehistoric Africa. The rhythm of life remains steady, shaped by the changing seasons and the dependable routines of everyday work. While future generations may remember kings, battles, and monuments, most people in this age spend their days engaged in simpler activities that leave softer footprints upon history. You begin the morning by following a narrow trail winding between distant settlements. The path is not marked on any map, yet countless feet have traveled it over many generations. It curves through grasslands, around clusters of trees, and beside seasonal streams. What appears to be an ordinary footpath is actually part of a growing network connecting communities across remarkable distances. Along these routes, people exchange useful goods gathered from different regions. Salt moves from dry areas toward wetter settlements. Shells collected far from the coast travel inland through many hands. Certain stones prized for toolmaking appear hundreds of miles from their original sources. These exchanges happen gradually, creating connections that strengthen over time. The travelers who carry such goods often bring something equally valuable. They share stories, techniques, observations, and news about changing conditions elsewhere. Information moves slowly, yet it moves consistently. In many ways, these ancient pathways function like quiet conversations stretching across entire landscapes, linking communities that may never directly encounter one another. Anthropological research suggests that daily life during this period is primarily centered on family, labor, ritual, and continuous adaptation rather than organized conflict or large-scale warfare. Most of the community's energy is dedicated to practical survival needs. Food must be gathered, tools carefully maintained, shelters repaired, and knowledge steadily passed on to younger generations in an ongoing, quiet rhythm of life. You spend time observing a family preparing for the day. One person sharpens a stone blade, another repairs a woven basket. Children collect firewood while elders share guidance based upon years of experience. The scene feels familiar despite the vast distance in time. Human life often changes less than we imagine when viewed through the lens of ordinary routines. Nearby, a cooking fire burns steadily. The flames crackle softly while food cooks over heated stones. Archaeologists frequently uncover traces of such hearths at ancient settlement sites. Though simple in appearance, these features reveal valuable details about daily activities, social gatherings, and patterns of habitation that might otherwise remain invisible. You kneel beside the remains of an ancient hearth preserved within the archaeological record. Charcoal fragments, ash deposits, and surrounding artifacts quietly preserve their story. It is remarkable how much information can survive in something as ordinary as a past fire. Even a simple campfire, in hindsight, becomes an unexpectedly reliable archivist of human presence. As afternoon sunlight spreads gently across the settlement, your attention shifts toward nearby pottery. A clay vessel rests near the edge of a shelter, its surface shaped through careful and patient craftsmanship. Such objects may appear modest beside larger monuments, yet they represent meaningful technological progress that quietly transforms daily survival and domestic organization over time. Pottery enables more efficient storage, transport, and preparation of food across changing seasons. These vessels support communities by preserving resources and improving stability in everyday life. Though simple in appearance, they reflect accumulated knowledge and practical innovation passed through generations. Each carefully formed container carries within it the quiet intelligence of long human adaptation and experience. Archaeologists study these vessels closely because they provide insights into trade, diet, and cultural traditions. Decorative patterns sometimes reveal regional identities or shared influences between distant communities. A single pot may contain clues about resources, craftsmanship, and social relationships extending far beyond the household that once used it. Nearby rests a stone spear point, carefully shaped through patient, repeated craftsmanship. Its edges remain remarkably sharp despite the passage of centuries and shifting environments. Tools like this support hunting, food preparation, and daily survival tasks. They also reflect accumulated knowledge passed down through generations. Every carefully crafted object carries embedded lessons, preserving practical experience learned long before the moment of its creation. Ritual and ceremony hold an important place within community life, woven gently into everyday routines. Seasonal gatherings mark key transitions in the annual cycle, often aligned with environmental or celestial changes. Certain locations may carry spiritual meaning connected to ancestors, landscape features, or sky observations. While practices vary between regions, they consistently strengthen social bonds and reinforce shared cultural understanding across generations. As evening approaches, people gather together near the water's edge in a calm, familiar rhythm. Conversations unfold slowly beside small fires while children listen quietly to stories preserved through memory. In societies without written records, oral traditions serve as living archives, carrying knowledge forward across generations. Important lessons, observations, and cultural values remain active through repeated storytelling. Beneath the steady presence of familiar stars, the surrounding environment continues to shape every aspect of daily existence in subtle yet constant ways. Communities carefully observe rainfall patterns, animal migrations, and seasonal transitions to guide their decisions. Success depends on understanding local ecosystems and responding appropriately when conditions change. Adaptation becomes a continuous skill, practiced not only during hardship but as part of ordinary life and long-term survival strategies. For many centuries, this delicate balance remains remarkably stable and enduring. Villages thrive beside dependable water sources, while exchange networks expand gradually across wider regions. Traditions evolve over time, yet maintain continuity with the past, preserving cultural identity. Although environmental conditions fluctuate from year to year, communities maintain the flexibility needed to adapt smoothly, navigating change without major disruption or collapse. Yet beneath this appearance of stability, larger transformations continue unfolding across northern Africa. Climate patterns shift slowly over many generations, often imperceptible within a single lifetime. Certain lakes become less reliable, while grasslands gradually retreat from some regions. These environmental changes remain subtle enough to escape immediate notice, yet they accumulate steadily, reshaping landscapes in ways only visible across long spans of time. People respond as they always have. Through careful observation and gradual adjustment, some communities modify seasonal movements to follow changing resources. Others strengthen connections with neighboring groups to ensure access to shared necessities. Knowledge of reliable water sources becomes increasingly valuable. No single moment marks the beginning of change. Instead, countless small decisions together slowly transform the human and environmental landscape. As darkness settles over the settlements, the trails between villages remain visible beneath moonlight. Pottery rests beside extinguished fires, tools await another day's work. Families sleep beneath the same stars observed by their ancestors. The steady patterns of daily life continue, calm and enduring, even as distant environmental shifts quietly begin guiding Africa toward new centers of population, influence, and opportunity in the centuries ahead. You awaken to another quiet morning in prehistoric Africa, Yet something subtle has begun to change. The familiar grasslands still stretch toward the horizon, and many lakes continue reflecting the sky as they have for countless generations. However, the balance that once seemed timeless is gradually shifting. Nature is turning a page so slowly that almost nobody notices it happening. The transformation begins not with a dramatic event, but with a sequence of almost invisible adjustments, unfolding across vast stretches of time. Over thousands of years, rainfall patterns gradually evolve. The powerful monsoon systems that once carried moisture deep into northern Africa no longer extend quite as far inland. Each generation inherits a landscape that still feels familiar, yet subtly different from the one experienced before it. Scientists studying ancient climate records have carefully reconstructed this long environmental transition using sediment cores, fossil pollen, and ancient lake deposits. These natural archives reveal that between roughly 5000 and 3000 BCE, the green Sahara gradually becomes significantly drier. The transformation unfolds over many centuries, making it one of the slowest and most patient climate shifts in recorded Earth history, almost imperceptible within a single lifetime. You stand quietly beside a lake that has supported nearby communities for countless generations. At first glance, everything appears stable and unchanged. Birds still gather along the shoreline in familiar patterns, and fish remain abundant beneath the surface. Yet older members of the community begin to notice subtle differences. Certain coves no longer retain water throughout the entire year, hinting at a gentle but ongoing environmental shift. The surrounding vegetation responds as well. Grasslands retreat from some regions while hardier plants become more common. Areas that once supported large herds grow less dependable. The changes remain gradual enough that people continue adapting without panic. They observe, adjust, and carry on with the steady resilience that has always characterized their lives. As decades pass, seasonal water sources become increasingly unpredictable. Small ponds disappear more frequently during dry periods. Streams that once flowed continuously now pause between rainy seasons. Communities begin paying closer attention to larger rivers and permanent lakes. Reliable water grows more valuable with each passing generation. You walk across a landscape where ancient shorelines remain clearly visible, even though the water has long since retreated. Former beaches now lie far from any living edge of the lake. The exposed ground quietly records this slow withdrawal. Nature leaves subtle clues everywhere, like a careful librarian placing small notes in the margins of an ancient, weathered book filled with forgotten stories. Archaeological evidence suggests that many communities respond to these gradual environmental changes by slowly relocating toward more dependable sources of water and food. This movement is rarely sudden or dramatic. Instead, families shift their settlements over long periods, following opportunities that appear near larger and more stable water systems. The process resembles roots quietly extending through soil in search of hidden moisture beneath the surface. Among the most important destinations in this slow migration is the Nile Valley. Unlike seasonal rivers or temporary lakes, the Nile continues to flow steadily year after year. Fed by distant rainfall far to the south, it provides a rare and valuable sense of stability. As surrounding environments grow less predictable, the river's consistent presence becomes increasingly important and attractive to expanding populations. The Nile offers far more than a reliable source of water for survival. It also creates fertile floodplains that support larger and more complex communities. Each year, rich sediments deposited during seasonal floods naturally renew the soil. In this way, the river functions almost like a generous host, quietly ensuring that every guest finds abundance without ever needing to ask or demand it. Elsewhere across the continent, populations gather around other major waterways and productive ecological regions, particularly in West Africa. Rivers, wetlands, and fertile corridors gradually become focal points of human activity and settlement. Communities once spread widely across the landscape begin to interact more frequently as they move closer together, creating new opportunities for cooperation, exchange, and shared cultural development over time. With greater population density comes increasing complexity in social life. People begin sharing resources more systematically, coordinating daily activities, and developing more organized social structures. Tasks gradually become specialized, allowing knowledge to accumulate at a faster pace. Networks that once linked distant settlements start to support larger, more interconnected communities, laying the groundwork for broader regional relationships that evolve over time. You observe a settlement positioned near a reliable river crossing where movement naturally converges. Travelers arrive carrying goods gathered from distant regions while information flows alongside trade. New ideas spread steadily between groups, shaping practices and expectations. Although no one recognizes it at the time, these expanding interactions are quietly laying the foundations for social systems that will later support villages, towns, and early states. Climate change does not operate alone in shaping the course of history. Human creativity and adaptability play an equally important role in survival and development. Communities respond to environmental pressures through adjustment rather than collapse. They experiment with new strategies, strengthen alliances, and refine existing knowledge. Their long-term success depends on flexibility, careful observation, and sustained cooperation across generations and changing conditions. One fascinating detail preserved by archaeology is that many former lakebeds across the Sahara contain extensive evidence of long-term human occupation. Researchers have uncovered tools, pottery fragments, and settlement remains that reveal how people continued adapting even as environmental conditions gradually shifted. The historical record suggests not sudden disappearance, but a process of gradual transformation marked by resilience and continuity as centuries pass. Dunes slowly advance into regions that were once covered in grasslands and water. Ancient pathways become buried beneath drifting sand, and certain lakes eventually disappear entirely. Yet people carry forward their memories, traditions, and practical knowledge as they move. Cultural continuity persists even when physical landscapes change dramatically, preserving identity across time and shifting environments. The transformation of the Sahara ultimately reshapes the broader human geography of Africa. Populations increasingly concentrate around reliable water sources, particularly rivers and stable wetlands. Trade routes grow more important as connections between communities intensify. Social organization becomes more complex and structured. This gradual shift unfolds so slowly that it resembles a river gently altering its course rather than a sudden or disruptive revolution. As evening settles across the changing land, the last light reflects from shrinking lakes and distant rivers alike. The Green Sahara is not disappearing in a single moment, but gradually yielding to a new reality. Communities continue adapting with quiet determination, gathering beside enduring waterways and preparing, often unknowingly, for the rise of more complex societies that will emerge along the Nile and beyond in the centuries ahead. The changing climate of earlier centuries continues to shape the landscape around you, yet the focus of the story gradually shifts from rivers and lakes toward human movement. Across vast distances, communities follow newly formed ecological corridors created by slow environmental change. Their journeys unfold gently over long periods of time, measured not in days or years, but in generations that extend quietly and continuously across entire centuries of lived experience. You watch a small group traveling along a wide grassland path lined with scattered trees and open sky. They carry tools, woven baskets, and visible belongings, yet they also carry memories, traditions, and inherited ways of living. Some possessions can be seen and touched, while others exist only in stories, songs, and learned habits that quietly travel farther than any physical object ever could. Migration in ancient Africa rarely resembles a single coordinated or large-scale movement. Instead, it unfolds through countless small local decisions made over time. One family settles near a river, another joins relatives in a nearby region, and a community gradually expands into surrounding land. Over long periods, these small adjustments accumulate into broader patterns that only become visible when viewed across vast stretches of history. The continent before written records appears deeply dynamic and constantly changing. People continuously adapt to shifting environmental conditions, seeking fertile soil, reliable water sources, and productive opportunities for survival. Movement becomes a normal part of life rather than an extraordinary event. In this way, human societies flow across landscapes, much like rivers responding naturally to changes in terrain and seasonal conditions over time. As you travel alongside these communities, you notice how knowledge accompanies every journey they make. Skills for crafting tools, cultivating plants, building shelters, and managing resources are passed carefully from one generation to the next. Migration becomes a powerful mechanism for spreading practical wisdom across great distances, linking regions that might otherwise remain isolated and disconnected from one another over time. Language travels as well. Words move with people, carrying ideas, identities, and cultural memory. Historical linguists studying modern African languages have uncovered deep connections that extend far back into prehistory. By carefully comparing vocabulary, grammar structures, and sound systems, researchers reconstruct relationships between languages that reveal ancient patterns of human interaction. These linguistic traces act like invisible maps, preserving evidence of movement, contact, and cultural exchange across vast regions and long spans of time. Long before written records existed, one of the most significant language families in Africa is the Niger-Congo family, which today includes hundreds of languages spoken across much of sub-Saharan Africa. Linguistic evidence suggests that its expansion occurred gradually over thousands of years. Rather than a single dramatic migration, it reflects continuous processes of movement, settlement, and interaction among communities, shaped by environment, trade, and everyday communication across generations. You imagine a child learning words from elders beside a small cooking fire at dusk. Those early words are passed gently from one generation to the next, carried into new environments as families move and settle elsewhere. Over time, language adapts to local conditions and neighboring influences. In this way, spoken language becomes a living archive, quietly preserving traces of human journeys long after physical footprints fade away. Among the most influential population movements linked to this linguistic history are the Bantu migrations, which begin many centuries later and unfold across an exceptionally long timescale. Communities speaking early Bantu languages gradually expand across vast regions of Central, Eastern, and Southern Africa. Along the way, they bring agricultural practices, ironworking technologies, and cultural traditions that interact with local environments and existing populations. Importantly, these migrations do not replace or erase earlier populations. Instead, they involve complex processes of interaction, exchange, and adaptation between different communities. Human history rarely follows simple or linear paths. Groups meet, cooperate, and share innovations while also maintaining distinct identities. Through these repeated encounters, new cultural forms emerge, creating a rich and interconnected tapestry shaped by countless generations of lived experience. As you continue your journey, it becomes clear that there is no single birthplace of African civilization. Instead, the continent holds many centers of innovation, adaptation, and cultural development. Different regions contribute their own traditions, technologies, and knowledge systems. History emerges from the meeting of many interconnected streams rather than from one dominant origin, forming a vast and shared continental narrative over time. This complexity is one of ancient Africa's most fascinating characteristics. While some historical narratives search for clear beginnings or singular origins, the reality is far more interconnected. It resembles a wide network of pathways stretching across forests, savannas, rivers, and coastlines. Each route carries its own contributions, and together they form a living system in which cultural exchange and development continuously unfold across regions. The expansion of exchange networks further strengthens these connections across the continent. Traders, travelers, and migrants move steadily between regions, carrying not only goods but also ideas and knowledge. Salt, stone, metals, and crafted objects travel alongside techniques, beliefs, and social customs. Over time, these routes become more than pathways for trade. They evolve into shared spaces where cultures meet, interact, and influence one another. You arrive at a crossroads where several paths converge near a dependable source of water. Small groups gather here regularly to exchange resources, information, and experiences. Such locations gradually gain importance over time, becoming natural points of interaction. Settlements along these routes benefit from constant movement, attracting skilled craftspeople, traders, and emerging leaders who help shape the surrounding social landscape. These developments encourage the gradual emergence of regional centers of influence across the landscape. Communities situated near major trade corridors gain clear advantages through access to both material resources and information flows. Their populations expand steadily, and their organizational structures become more complex. New forms of leadership arise to manage cooperation, resolve challenges, and coordinate increasingly interconnected social relationships. One pattern visible throughout global history begins to appear clearly here as well. Trade routes often create conditions for innovation long before large political states are formed. The steady movement of goods naturally encourages communication between groups, and communication in turn stimulates creativity and adaptation. Even a simple path across open grassland can sometimes shape the future more profoundly than the grandest monument ever constructed. As night falls across the continent, countless travelers continue their journeys beneath familiar stars. Some move only a short distance, others cross entire regions over generations. Together, they carry languages, traditions, technologies, and memories through an ever-changing landscape. These pathways of migration weave Africa into a vast network of human connections, quietly preparing the ground for the regional kingdoms and centers of power that will soon begin rising along the continent's growing trade routes. The pathways of migration gradually lead you toward a new chapter in Africa's long story. Communities that once seemed scattered across immense landscapes are now increasingly connected through trade, shared knowledge, and stable settlements. Along rivers and fertile corridors, larger societies begin to emerge. They do not appear suddenly. Like trees growing beside dependable water, they develop slowly, season after season. As you move northward toward the Nile Valley, the river remains a constant companion throughout the landscape. Its waters flow with calm certainty through regions that are becoming increasingly central to human life. Villages gradually expand into larger, more complex communities. Local leaders begin coordinating resources more systematically, while exchange networks extend farther across space, quietly laying foundations for early kingdoms under familiar skies. Many of these societies leave behind few or no written records of their own histories. Yet their experiences and identities survive through other powerful means. Stories are passed carefully from one generation to the next, while ceremonies preserve collective memory within shared rituals. Songs carry important lessons across centuries of time. In this way, elders function as living libraries whose knowledge is protected, remembered, and shared within their communities. You sit quietly beside an evening fire as voices around you recite accounts of ancestors, migrations, and significant historical events. No ink is written on parchment, and no stone inscriptions preserve these words in permanent form. Yet the stories remain alive and resilient. Oral tradition proves remarkably strong, especially in societies where memory is regarded as both an art form and a deep communal responsibility. For modern historians, reconstructing these early histories requires both patience and imagination. Multiple disciplines work together to uncover the past, including archaeology, linguistics, environmental science, and the study of oral traditions. Each field contributes a different piece of the puzzle, and together they help reveal complex societies whose achievements might otherwise remain hidden beneath layers of time and environmental change. Among the most fascinating early centers of civilization is ancient Nubia, located south of Egypt along the Nile River. This region occupies a strategic geographic position linking Central Africa with the northeastern regions of the continent. Rivers, deserts, and overland trade routes converge here, creating long-term opportunities for economic development, cultural interaction, and exchange that unfolds gradually over many centuries of human history. Within Nubia, one especially significant civilization emerges: Kerma. Developing around the 3rd millennium BCE, Kerma grows into a powerful and influential kingdom characterized by organized administration, complex social systems, and impressive architectural achievements, although it is often overshadowed in historical narratives by its northern neighbor Egypt. Kerma stands as one of the most important and sophisticated societies in ancient Africa during its period of prominence and regional influence. You approach the city of Kerma during its height, when its presence dominates the surrounding landscape. Large and carefully constructed structures rise above the horizon, signaling both power and coordination. Among the most striking are monumental mud brick buildings known as defufas. These massive structures serve ceremonial, religious, and administrative purposes, reflecting a society capable of managing large-scale labor, resources, and long-term architectural planning. Archaeological discoveries reveal evidence of highly organized urban life within Kerma. Distinct residential areas, specialized workshops, storage facilities, and ceremonial spaces indicate a well-structured and functional social system. The kingdom supports a diverse population of artisans, traders, farmers, and administrators, whose coordinated activities sustain a stable and productive regional economy over extended periods of development. Trade plays a central and defining role in Kerma's prosperity and long-term influence. Goods move steadily along the Nile River and across desert trade routes that connect distant regions. Gold, ivory, ebony, livestock, and other valuable materials circulate through these extensive networks. Merchants travel long distances, carrying not only physical goods but also ideas, technologies, and cultural influences that shape neighboring societies. One lesser-known historical fact is that Kerma becomes a significant rival to Egypt during several periods of ancient history. Modern discussions often focus primarily on Egyptian achievements, yet archaeological evidence demonstrates that Kerma possesses substantial political and military influence. At times, the relationship between the two powers involves cooperation, competition, and shifting alliances. You might imagine diplomats, traders, and travelers moving between neighboring civilizations, each carefully observing the strengths and practices of the other. History is rarely a story of isolated cultures. Instead, societies develop through continuous interaction. Even rival groups exchange knowledge, technologies, and customs, often without fully realizing the depth of their mutual influence across regions, generations, and shifting political landscapes over time. The prosperity of the kingdom also supports significant advances in craftsmanship and artistic expression. Skilled artisans create finely made pottery, jewelry, and decorative objects that reflect both utility and beauty. Some Kerma ceramics are regarded as among the most refined examples of ancient African pottery. Their elegant designs reveal not only technical expertise, but also a deep sense of aesthetic sophistication and cultural identity. As evening sunlight reflects softly across the surface of the Nile, you observe farmers working fertile fields enriched by seasonal flooding. Agriculture forms the essential foundation upon which larger social systems are built. Reliable food production enables population growth and supports increasing specialization within society. Builders, artisans, administrators, and traders all rely on this agricultural stability to sustain their roles and responsibilities. Yet, life within these ancient kingdoms remains closely connected to rhythms, far older than any political structure or administrative system. The river continues to dictate seasonal cycles, while the stars mark the passage of time above. Communities gather regularly for ceremonies that honor traditions passed down through countless generations. Beneath institutional development, everyday life remains grounded in familiar, enduring natural patterns across the wider African continent. Additional regional centers of power and influence gradually emerge in different environments. Each develops according to its own local conditions, available resources, and cultural traditions. There is no single model for state formation in ancient Africa. Instead, societies follow diverse paths while responding to shared challenges such as trade, population growth, and environmental adaptation. You notice how these kingdoms resemble clusters of trees growing along a riverbank, each drawing nourishment from its immediate surroundings. Every community develops its own distinct character, shaped by place and history. Some grow larger, others remain smaller, and some endure longer than others. Yet all contribute meaningfully to the broader, interconnected landscape of human history unfolding across the continent. As darkness settles over the Nile once more, the lights of Kerma glow softly against the night. Stories continue around fires. Traders prepare for tomorrow's journeys. Leaders oversee growing networks of exchange and administration. Without relying on written records, these early kingdoms preserve their histories through memory, tradition, and lasting achievements, quietly preparing the rise of major commercial networks across West Africa. The kingdoms rising along rivers and trade corridors now guide you farther west, into the vast landscapes of the Sahel. Here, between the Sahara to the north and the greener regions to the south, a broad belt of grassland stretches across the continent. The horizon seems endless. Winds move gently through tall grasses, and ancient pathways quietly connect communities separated by remarkable distances. You begin your journey at dawn beside a river whose waters reflect the soft colors of the morning sky. Along its banks, generations of people have gathered resources from the surrounding land. Among the most valuable is gold, hidden within sediments carried by rivers over countless centuries. The precious metal rests silently beneath gravel and sand, waiting to be discovered. At first, the gold appears almost modest. Tiny flakes catch the sunlight for a moment before disappearing beneath flowing water. Yet these small fragments will eventually influence trade networks stretching across thousands of miles. History often begins with surprisingly ordinary details. Entire economic systems may grow from something no larger than a grain of rice. Long before famous empires such as Ghana appear in historical records, communities throughout West Africa participate in regional exchange networks. Archaeological evidence suggests that trade routes develop gradually over many centuries. Goods move between neighboring settlements, then across wider regions. creating connections that steadily strengthen through repeated interaction. You follow one of these early routes as it winds across the Savannah. Travelers carry salt, copper, stone tools, crafted goods, and food supplies. Each journey may cover only part of a larger network, yet together these routes form an intricate web extending across enormous distances. The movement remains steady, patient, and remarkably persistent. Salt becomes one of the most important commodities in these early exchange systems. Essential for human survival and the preservation of food, it is highly valued in regions where natural supplies are scarce or unevenly distributed. Large salt deposits found in northern areas eventually become vital resources for communities across the Sahel and surrounding regions, shaping long-distance trade routes and relationships. Meanwhile, copper moves steadily through these expanding trade networks, serving both practical and symbolic purposes. Skilled artisans transform the metal into tools, ornaments, and finely crafted decorative objects that reflect status and identity. The circulation of copper encourages technological development and strengthens connections between regions with different resources. Each traded object carries with it a layered history of movement, exchange, and human connection. As the day grows warmer, you arrive at a riverside area where gold has been collected for countless generations. People carefully sift through sediments, searching for small valuable particles carried downstream by natural river processes. The work demands patience, repetition, and close attention. There are no sudden discoveries here, only steady effort rewarded occasionally by brief flashes of yellow brilliance in the flowing water. Looking across the river, you notice how calm and peaceful the entire scene appears under the bright daylight. Gold briefly sparkles beneath the sunlight before disappearing again beneath moving water and sediment. Nature itself shows no awareness of the value humans assign to precious metals. The river continues its steady flow carrying gold, stones, and leaves with the same quiet indifference. One fascinating feature of these early trade systems is how they support cultural exchange alongside economic activity across great distances. Travelers carry songs, oral stories, technologies, and belief systems from one region to another. Ideas move as freely as physical goods along established routes. In this way, communities that rarely meet directly become connected through long chains of interaction. Stretching across the continent, you pause at a gathering, place where traders rest beside a dependable water source while exchanging goods and information. Conversations move between topics such as weather conditions, distant settlements, and recent developments along major trade routes. News travels slowly but reliably through human networks. In a world without written newspapers or modern communication devices, human curiosity and storytelling remain powerful tools for sharing knowledge. Archaeologists studying ancient West African sites have uncovered strong evidence of long-distance exchange networks that existed long before the rise of major centralized states. Imported materials are found far from their original sources, demonstrating extensive commercial relationships across large regions. These discoveries suggest that complex economic systems often develop gradually and may emerge well before large political structures or formalized governance systems take shape. As generations pass, certain settlements begin to benefit significantly from their strategic positions along key trade routes. Communities located near river crossings, resource-rich zones, or major geographical intersections attract increasing numbers of traders and travelers. Population steadily grows over time, while economic activity expands in both scale and complexity. As a result, social organization becomes more structured, allowing these settlements to evolve into increasingly sophisticated regional hubs. You can almost sense future kingdoms beginning to form within these evolving patterns of exchange and settlement. No single ruler announces their arrival, and no grand ceremony marks the beginning of new political structures. Instead, influence accumulates slowly through trade, cooperation, and geographic advantage. Economic activity creates opportunities, and those opportunities gradually encourage the development of larger, more organized, and more interconnected societies across the landscape. The landscape itself plays an active role in shaping these historical processes. The Sahel functions as a vast natural corridor linking diverse environments and cultural regions. Northern deserts, southern forests, and central grasslands converge within this broad transitional zone. As a result, the region becomes a natural bridge between different ecological worlds, encouraging sustained interaction, movement, and exchange across cultural and environmental boundaries over long periods of time. One especially notable feature of long-distance trade is its ability to generate unexpected cultural blending. Artistic traditions, technologies, and social customs often spread alongside goods and commodities. Communities adapt external influences to their own local practices, creating new hybrid forms of expression. These cultural developments reflect both continuity with the past and ongoing innovation shaped by constant interaction between diverse groups across vast regions. As evening approaches, caravans prepare once again to continue their journeys across the open landscape. Some travel toward resource-rich areas, while others move toward growing settlements along established trade routes. Their movement appears almost timeless against the backdrop of the vast savanna. Travelers come and go across generations, yet the pathways themselves remain, quietly connecting people, places, and histories through shared patterns of exchange. The rivers continue flowing past gold-bearing banks just as they have for thousands of years. The grasslands sway beneath evening winds. Traders disappear into the distance while communities gather near fires beneath emerging stars. Through these quiet and enduring networks, West Africa is gradually laying the foundations for future empires, while at the same time weaving together a rich tapestry of cultures whose influence will endure for centuries to come. The trade routes of West Africa continue expanding across the savanna, and over time, some communities grow into larger political centers. Settlements become towns. Towns become capitals. Networks of exchange support increasingly organized systems of leadership. Yet, as you move through this chapter of history, you quickly notice something important. Even the largest states remain only temporary. Guests within a much older landscape, you stand upon a gentle rise, overlooking a busy settlement connected to distant regions through trade and communication networks. Caravans arrive regularly carrying salt, metals, textiles, and stories from faraway places. Administrators oversee exchanges, while local leaders coordinate resources and resolve practical matters. The settlement appears stable and permanent, as though it will endure indefinitely. Yet history often redefines permanence in unexpected ways. Across Africa, as in many parts of the world, larger states emerge gradually from pre-existing networks of cooperation, exchange, and commerce. Their growth is shaped by favorable geography, access to essential resources, and the capacity to manage relationships among diverse communities. Expansion occurs slowly over time, driven more by practical needs and gradual integration than by sudden political or military transformations. As populations increase and trade flourishes, rulers increasingly seek to secure important routes and productive regions under their control. Boundaries gradually expand as new territories become connected to existing centers of influence. Administrative systems grow more complex to manage resources and populations. Yet beneath these larger political developments, daily life for most people continues with remarkable stability and consistency across generations. You walk through farming villages located far from major political capitals and centers of authority. Here, the concerns of ordinary families remain familiar and practical in nature. Fields must be carefully planted and harvested according to seasonal cycles. Livestock require constant care and attention. Water sources must be maintained and shared. Children gradually learn essential skills from older generations as local life continues regardless of shifting political rule. This pattern appears repeatedly throughout the broader course of history across many regions. Dynasties rise to power and eventually fall. Kingdoms expand their influence and later contract. Despite these changes at the political level, communities often preserve their traditions and ways of life through each transition. Historical sociologists note that local adaptation and social continuity frequently prove more durable than the governing structures that temporarily oversee them. As evening approaches, you sit quietly beside a farmer watching crops sway gently in the warm wind. Occasional news of distant rulers and political events reaches the village, but the immediate concern remains the upcoming harvest. Rainfall patterns, soil quality, and seasonal timing shape daily decisions far more directly than developments occurring hundreds of miles away in distant administrative centers. One lightly amusing thought arises as you observe the scene unfolding around you. While kings and rulers may spend years negotiating borders and debating territorial claims, the goats appear completely uninterested in political geography. They continue moving steadily through the fields, searching for the best patches of grass with unwavering focus, seemingly convinced that grazing rights require no formal treaties or diplomatic agreements at all. The larger states of ancient Africa, nevertheless, achieve impressive accomplishments. Trade networks become more secure, infrastructure improves, administrative systems facilitate coordination across wider territories, centers of learning and craftsmanship emerge, markets expand. These developments create opportunities that benefit many communities connected to broader regional systems. At the same time, competition occasionally arises over valuable resources, strategic locations, and important trade corridors. Conflicts occur, alliances shift, and territories change hands. Yet even these events often unfold within larger patterns of adaptation and continuity. Communities learn to navigate changing circumstances while preserving essential aspects of daily life. You notice how rivers continue flowing regardless of political developments across time. The Nile follows its ancient course without interruption. Seasonal rains arrive and depart in steady cycles. Grasslands shift gently in response to changing weather patterns. Nature remains both participant and observer in human affairs, providing the stable environmental framework within which all societies must adapt and exist. Historical evidence suggests that many local institutions outlast the states and political systems surrounding them. Families, villages, trade partnerships, and cultural traditions often persist through multiple cycles of change and political transition. Their resilience comes from flexibility and adaptability, rather than relying entirely on centralized authority. These structures adjust to shifting conditions while maintaining continuity, allowing knowledge, customs, and social relationships to endure across generations. As you travel farther, the passage of centuries begins to feel compressed into a single continuous panorama of change. One kingdom expands, reaches its peak, and gradually declines, while another emerges in a nearby region. Trade routes shift slightly over time, and settlements grow or become quieter depending on circumstances. The landscape remains in constant motion, yet it retains an underlying sense of continuity and familiar rhythm. From this broader perspective, political history begins to resemble weather patterns moving slowly across an immense sky. Some states expand into large and influential powers, while others remain smaller regional entities. A few leave particularly visible marks on the historical record. Yet all eventually pass beyond their moment of prominence. No political structure remains unchanged forever, regardless of its achievements, ambitions, or duration. You find yourself standing beneath a vast evening sky that seems to stretch endlessly across the African continent. Clouds drift slowly overhead, casting shifting shadows across rivers, grasslands, and distant settlements. The image feels fitting and symbolic. Empires, like clouds, pass over the land during their existence. They influence the landscapes beneath them, but they never fully own or permanently define them. One important lesson from historical research is that human adaptation often unfolds on different timescales than political power. Communities develop strategies for survival, cooperation, and cultural continuity that extend far beyond the lifespan of rulers or dynasties. Their long-term success depends less on dominance and more on persistence, flexibility, and the steady maintenance of relationships across changing environments and historical conditions. The merchants continue trading along established routes. Farmers continue planting and harvesting crops according to seasonal cycles. Craftspeople continue shaping tools, pottery, and everyday objects with practiced skill. Parents continue teaching children the knowledge needed for survival and belonging. Together, these ongoing activities form the enduring foundation upon which larger political systems rise, transform, and eventually fade, even when historical attention is focused elsewhere. As darkness settles across the Savanna, the lights of distant settlements flicker beneath the stars. Some belong to growing centers of influence. Others stand far from major political networks. Yet all participate in the same vast human story. Viewed across centuries, the empires of Africa appear like passing clouds moving across an ancient sky, while the communities below continue adapting, enduring, and preparing the memories that will one day be preserved in stone. The clouds of empires drift slowly across the centuries behind you, yet their presence does not entirely disappear. Long after rulers, merchants, and travelers have completed their journeys, traces remain scattered across the landscape. Some survive in stories spoken beside evening fires. Others endure in stone, metal, and earth. Together, they preserve memories that continue whispering across generations. You begin this chapter walking through a quiet landscape at dawn. The air feels still, and the horizon glows with soft light. Ahead, partially hidden among grasses and trees, stand the remains of structures built long ago. Though their builders have vanished into history, the stones remain patiently where they were placed, carrying fragments of forgotten lives. Archaeologists often describe material remains as quiet conversations carried across vast stretches of time. Every wall, tool, vessel, and burial site contains information waiting to be carefully interpreted. Unlike written records, these objects communicate without words or voices. Through their design, placement, use, and survival, they reveal patterns of trade, craftsmanship, belief, and everyday life that might otherwise remain hidden from history. You pause beside an ancient mound rising gently above the surrounding landscape. Burial sites like this appear throughout many regions of Africa and frequently become important cultural landmarks. Beneath layers of earth rest objects placed there centuries ago, preserving valuable clues about social organization, ritual traditions, and the enduring relationships communities maintained with ancestors whose memories continued shaping life long after their passing. Nearby, a small bronze artifact catches the soft morning sunlight as it rests among weathered stones. Objects like this often travel through extensive and complex trade networks before reaching their final destinations. Their presence reflects not only advanced technical skill, but also long-distance connections linking diverse societies. Even a simple ornament can reveal a surprisingly rich history of exchange, movement, and cultural interaction. As the day unfolds gradually, your journey carries you farther south toward one of Africa's most remarkable archaeological sites, Great Zimbabwe. Situated among rolling hills and dramatic granite outcrops, this extraordinary settlement flourishes between roughly the 11th and 15th centuries. Even today, its monumental stone architecture continues to inspire admiration, curiosity, and careful study from historians, archaeologists, and travelers seeking to understand its origins and significance. Approaching the site, you first notice the impressive scale and presence of its stone walls rising across the landscape. Massive enclosures curve gracefully while reaching significant height and structure. What makes them especially remarkable is the construction technique itself. Builders carefully stack thousands of precisely shaped granite blocks without the use of mortar, creating enduring structures that remain stable and intact for centuries. You gently run your hand along one of these ancient stone walls and begin to imagine the immense effort required to build it. Each block is carefully selected, shaped, transported, and positioned with remarkable precision and patience. Stability is achieved not through adhesive materials, but through engineering skill and balance. The process resembles assembling an enormous three-dimensional puzzle, except that each piece weighs several tons and must fit perfectly into place. Great Zimbabwe serves as a major center of trade, governance, and cultural life. Archaeological discoveries indicate connections extending to distant regions through commercial networks. Imported beads, ceramics, and other goods demonstrate the settlement's participation in wider systems of exchange, linking inland Africa with coastal trading communities. The success of Great Zimbabwe depends on far more than its impressive stone architecture alone. Agriculture, cattle herding, careful resource management, and active commercial exchange all work together to sustain its prosperity. Like many earlier societies encountered throughout this journey, the settlement thrives through a balanced combination of environmental adaptation, economic organization, and social cooperation that evolves gradually over long periods of time. One important lesson becomes clear as you explore the site more deeply. Civilizations rarely disappear completely when their political structures decline or fragment. Instead, their knowledge continues to circulate within surrounding communities. Construction techniques, artistic traditions, agricultural practices, and social customs often persist long after individual states have faded. Ideas travel across regions more easily than armies and can endure far longer than physical monuments. Across the continent, you begin to notice this same pattern repeating in many different forms. A kingdom rises, flourishes, and eventually fades from prominence, yet neighboring societies adopt its most useful innovations. Trade networks adjust and continue rather than collapsing entirely. Oral traditions preserve collective memories. Cultural influences blend and evolve, creating new expressions that still carry traces of older traditions within them. Oral histories passed down through generations hold particular importance in maintaining this continuity. Skilled storytellers preserve genealogies, accounts of migrations, significant events, and moral teachings. While details may shift slightly over time, the core narratives help connect past and present. In this way, memory survives not only through physical objects or inscriptions, but also through living voices shared within communities. As evening approaches, you sit quietly among the ancient stone ruins while long shadows stretch across the ground. The walls no longer contain the sounds of bustling markets or royal gatherings. Birds now occupy spaces once filled with human activity and conversation. Yet the site does not feel entirely abandoned. Instead, it carries a reflective stillness, as though history itself has chosen to rest here temporarily. The same feeling can be found at countless archaeological sites across Africa. Stone circles, burial mounds, ancient settlements, and scattered artifacts remain distributed across deserts, savannas, forests, and river valleys. Together, they form a vast archive, preserved not within written libraries, but within the landscape itself, quietly recording layers of human experience across time. Looking across the centuries, you begin to see that every society contributes something to those that follow. Knowledge accumulates slowly and continuously. Traditions adapt to new circumstances. Technologies evolve through repeated use and exchange. Human history resembles a broad river carrying countless small streams into a larger and continuous flow. No contribution is ever entirely lost, even when its original source becomes difficult to identify. As the sky darkens, the first stars appear above the ancient stones, their light traveling across immense distances before reaching the earth. This quiet realization gently shifts your perspective toward an even larger scale of time and existence. Human civilizations, remarkable as they are, exist within vast cosmic and geological timescales far greater than any single kingdom, culture, or trade network. As night settles over Great Zimbabwe, the walls remain silent beneath the stars. The memories preserved in stone, bronze, earth, and story continue their quiet work, connecting generations separated by centuries. Around them, nature patiently endures, and history itself begins to soften into something deeper, preparing you for the final chapter, where rivers, deserts, and civilizations alike dissolve into the vast and timeless currents of geological time. The ancient stones of Great Zimbabwe slowly fade into the darkness behind you, and now your journey widens one final time. The kingdoms, trade routes, villages, and forgotten pathways that have accompanied you across prehistoric Africa begin to settle into a much larger frame. The story is no longer measured in centuries or even millennia. Instead, it unfolds across the vast scales of geological time. You find yourself standing beneath a sky that feels almost unchanged from the one that watched over the first rivers of the green Sahara. The stars shine with the same quiet patience. The winds move with the same gentle rhythm. Human history, which once seemed immense, now becomes a brief chapter within a far older and larger narrative. From the perspective of millions of years, every kingdom appears surprisingly small. Great trade networks flourish and disappear. Boundaries emerge and fade. Capitals rise, thrive, and eventually become archaeological sites. Even the most influential rulers occupy only a moment within the endless movement of the earth itself. You imagine a vast timeline stretching across the landscape before you. Entire civilizations appear like tiny sparks of light, glowing briefly before merging back into darkness. Their achievements remain meaningful, yet they exist within a framework so large that individual centuries become almost impossible to distinguish from one another. The rivers you have followed throughout this journey continue altering their courses across the landscape. Some gradually grow larger as conditions change, while others shrink or disappear entirely. Ancient channels vanish beneath layers of sand, only to be rediscovered thousands of years later through scientific investigation. Water remains one of history's most patient architects, quietly reshaping continents and ecosystems without any concern for human calendars or recorded timelines. The Sahara itself offers a powerful reminder of this continual transformation. Once green, fertile, and dotted with lakes, it gradually becomes one of the largest deserts on Earth. Yet even this condition is not truly permanent. Geological evidence suggests that climatic cycles have repeatedly reshaped the region across immense spans of time. The desert, like rivers, kingdoms, and civilizations, continues changing in ways both visible and subtle. You walk across a landscape where countless generations once lived, worked, traveled, and dreamed. Most left no written records behind. Their names have faded, their voices have disappeared, yet traces remain preserved within the land itself. Footprints become fossils, settlements become layers of soil, stories become patterns hidden within archaeology. The deeper you look, the more the earth resembles a vast archive. Sediments accumulate year after year, rivers deposit minerals, wines transport dust across continents. Each layer preserves fragments of environmental and human history. Nature records events with remarkable dedication, though it writes in a language measured by patience rather than words. One quiet thought brings a gentle smile to your face as the evening settles around you. Humanity often worries about being remembered forever, building monuments and preserving stories against the passage of time. Meanwhile, the surrounding rocks have calmly been keeping records for millions of years without ever seeking attention or recognition. Geological time possesses a quiet confidence, content to exist without applause, witnesses, or an audience. As evening deepens, you begin noticing how many themes from earlier chapters remain closely connected to one another. Water guides migration, trade encourages cooperation, communities adapt to changing conditions. Kingdoms emerge from older networks that already exist beneath the surface. Every development grows naturally from what comes before. History resembles a river not because it moves quickly, but because its movement never truly ceases. Even when it appears still, the people of prehistoric Africa do not vanish when settlements change or when new societies emerge across the landscape. Their descendants carry knowledge forward into different times and places. Languages gradually evolve. Traditions adapt to new circumstances. Skills pass patiently from one generation to another. Human continuity remains remarkably resilient, persisting across centuries, even as political systems, borders, and centers of power transform around it. Looking across the continent, you can almost sense countless layers of history existing together within the same landscape. Beneath modern cities lie older settlements long forgotten by most people. Beneath those settlements rest ancient campsites from distant ages. Deeper still are landscapes shaped by rivers, lakes, and climate cycles. Every era leaves traces behind, contributing to an ongoing conversation that gently connects past and present. The night air grows cooler now as darkness settles softly across the grasslands. Tall grasses whisper beneath a gentle breeze moving through the savanna. Somewhere far in the distance, water continues flowing through a river channel, much as it did thousands of years ago. The sound feels strangely familiar. It accompanied early communities, witnessed the rise of kingdoms, and remained present through the long procession of generations. You no longer focus upon specific rulers, battles, or individual events scattered across the centuries. Instead, your attention drifts toward broader and quieter patterns. The earth changes, life adapts, cultures evolve, memories persist in unexpected forms. The great story of Africa before written records does not conclude with a final ending. It simply merges into larger currents that continue flowing beyond the horizon of recorded history. Now the landscape becomes quieter still as the stars appear brighter above the sleeping world. The spaces between sounds grow wider, softer, and more peaceful. You imagine the lakes of the green Sahara, the traders crossing distant savannas, the farmers beside the Nile, and the builders of great stone walls. All belong to the same endless river of time flowing onward beneath the silent stars. The centuries begin to dissolve. The kingdoms become distant reflections upon water. The trade routes fade like footprints after a gentle rain. The voices of countless generations blend into the steady breathing of the land itself. Nothing is lost entirely. Everything becomes part of a larger continuity stretching beyond memory. And now, as the final moments of this journey arrive, you simply listen. The wind moves quietly across the savanna beneath a sky filled with stars. Far away, an ancient river follows its patient course through the darkness. Beneath the soil, layers of earth continue preserving stories older than language. Time itself seems to slow, becoming softer, calmer, and more distant with every passing moment. The night grows deeper. The landscape rests. The rivers rest. The stones rest. The memories of countless generations settle gently into the earth, where they will remain long after all stories have been told. There is no need to hurry anywhere now. Only the faint whisper of grass in the darkness, the distant murmur of water beyond the horizon, and the endless stillness of geological time remain beside you. The script comes to a close. Thank you all for listening.